I never liked playing cards. Some of my friends tried to teach me poker when I was in college, but I could never get the hang of it, so I never bothered learning which hand beats other hands, or how to play Texas Drop M, or what it's called there. It just wasn't of any interest to me. I got tired of giving away money to my ruthless friends and stopped playing altogether. My wife Kathy, however, loved playing poker and was exceptionally good at it. She played in a few local tournaments and did quite well, but she usually played with a regular group of her friends. The group met once or twice a month at the home of her friends, Larry and Sandy. They had a nice townhouse in the suburbs. Notice I said, her friends. Katie had known them since college, and Sandy was her roommate. The group consisted of Larry and Sandy, who both played poker with the group. My wife Kathy, Paul, Brian, Terry, and Mark. Present but not playing were myself, Paul's wife Mary, and Brian's wife Allison. We usually sat in the living room and watched TV. There used to be a guy named Wes who also played, but he was caught cheating and kicked out of the band. I didn't mind Katie playing, but like I said, it was her friends, not mine. Mary and Allison were okay. We were actually becoming good friends, but the rest were okay at best. I could never imagine myself interacting with any of them by choice. I didn't necessarily dislike these guys except for Mark. Mark was a complete jerk, and I frankly disliked him. Terry and Mark were lonely. Terry was quiet and unassuming and apparently not very good at poker. Mark was a complete jerk, and if I ever ran into him in public, I would probably ignore him. He was loud, obnoxious, and narcissistic. I argued with him more than once and tolerated him only because he was a member of my wife's poker group, and we only saw him when they played poker. My only real problem with the poker night was that it brought out Katie's extremely competitive side. If she loses, she will be in a bad mood the whole next day. I told her more than once that she was taking it too seriously, but she brushed it off. She's been trying to make poker night a weekly thing lately, but I really didn't want to spend that much time with these people. Luckily, Mary and Allison felt the same way, so there were no weekly poker nights, just yet. One Saturday night we were at Larry and Sandy's, and the regular band was playing. It was obviously a bad night for Katie. Every now and then, I would come over to see if she wanted something to drink, and she would always get angry. It was already quite late, past the time they usually stopped, when I heard a noise from the dining room where they were playing. As I walked in, I heard Mark say, "It was a bet. Don't dodge it." Larry followed him. "You know the rules, Kat. You don't fulfill the bet, you're out of the group." Then Katie said, Okay, let's get this over with. Now it's my turn. What's happening?" "Katie lost all her money and gave me the pleasure of the last hand," Mark said with a smile and a "fuck you" look on his face. "She lost. Now it's time to pay." "Sorry, Katie won't do this to anyone but me." "Hey guy, she made a bet and lost. These are the rules." It was then that Katie decided to begin sealing her destiny. "Henry, it's okay. I lost. I have to pay." "No, Katie, you must be faithful to me. What you want to do is pay a rate that will cheat me. Mark justified my opinion that he was dorky. You're watching here, so it's not treason." "You know what, idiot? Keep your fucking mouth shut. Believe it or not, it's not about you. Katie, come on. We're leaving." "Henry, I don't want to do this, but I have to. If I don't do this, I'll be kicked out. I don't care if you get kicked out. I don't care if you never play poker again." Went. I headed towards her. "Hey guys, you'll have to help me." Katie looked at Paul and Brian and tilted her head in my direction. As I moved toward Katie, Paul and Brian grabbed me from behind. I started to struggle, but Larry intervened and helped them hold me down. "Are you serious, idiots? Are you going to hold me while my wife does this in front of me?" "Listen," said Larry, "she made a bet and knew where it would lead. She doesn't want to go out, so she pays the rate." Then he laughed. "Don't worry, Mark won't last long. He really was an asshole." He stepped forward and found himself directly in front of Katie, who was on her knees. "Catherine, do this, and we'll be done." I didn't shout. I spoke very calmly, using her full name. "Stop being dramatic, Henry," she said. She began to lean forward. When she did this, I screamed very loudly. "Stop for a second." She stopped and looked at me. "I just want to be clear. Is everyone okay with this?" Silence reigned in the room. Then Mark shuffled forward again and said, "Come on, he's ruining the mood." Katie leaned forward. "Okay, that's enough. I can't look at it. Let me go and I'll leave." I had the beginning of a plan. I thought it was over between me and Katie, but I needed to get some revenge on this idiot. Katie let the end of his cock slide out of her mouth and nodded to the bastards holding me. They released me, and I calmly walked towards Katie. Approaching them, I pretended to be trying to take off my wedding ring. The fingers of the left hand were splayed, and the right hand was twisted, trying to remove the wedding ring. Katie was kneeling to my left, with a determined look on her face. Mark was standing to my right and just grinning. Approaching them, I said to Katie, "I told you that if you do this, we're finished." Now I stood next to them and looked at Katie. The fingers of my left hand were spread out, as if I was trying to remove the ring. My right hand was clenched into a fist. "You did it anyway, Catherine, and with such an idiot." After saying the word, "this," I hit Mark in the nose with the back of my right fist. He immediately raised both hands to cover his face. I immediately turned to the right and punched both hands, covering his bloody face with my left fist. His head fell back and he lost his balance. Since his jeans and boxers were around his ankles, he fell on his butt and then flat on his back. He landed on the floor between the dining table and a large antique cabinet. I was very angry and continued to improvise. Katie fell on her butt, and I was now standing at Mark's feet looking down at him. There was a dining table to my right and an antique wardrobe to my left. The table was quite large. 8 people sat comfortably on it, with 3 chairs on each side. The cabinet was huge and must have been at least 6 feet long. The base was about 30 inches high and was oak with a bunch of drawers and doors. The top half sat on the base and was another 40 inches or so higher. I grabbed the very top of the antique cabinet, knowing I couldn't knock it over, but maybe I could scare the hell out of him. The base alone must have weighed 300 pounds with everything inside, and the top half was a wooden frame with mirrored glass doors and was filled with decorative china, Hummel figurines, a few snow globes, and other things they collected. Unfortunately for Mark, Larry was never able to properly attach the top half to the bottom. When I pulled on it, the top half tipped over. While it wasn't my intention to pull the top half on Mark, I liked how it came together. When the cabinet tipped over and landed, it sounded like an explosion. Luckily for Mark, there wasn't enough space between the stand and the table for the cabinet to land on it. Instead, the bottom part remained on the stand, and the top part landed on the dining table. Unfortunately for Mark, everything that was displayed in the antique cabinet slid forward and crashed through the glass doors of the cabinet. Shards of glass and shards of glass from the doors rained down on him. Then everything inside the closet fell into shards of glass. He must have received hundreds of cuts. Fortunately for Mark, he covered his bloody face with his hands to prevent shards of glass from getting into his broken nose or eyes. Unfortunately for Mark, when he fell on his back, his shirt rode up all the way to his stomach. Since his jeans and boxers were pulled down to his ankles, everything from his upper abdomen to the middle of his shins was exposed. He immediately began bleeding heavily. All this happened in a matter of seconds. Everyone froze and looked with shocked expressions on their faces. I was in improvisation mode, so, feigning concern, I walked around the table where his head was and said loudly, "Don't touch him! Call an ambulance!" Having reached his head, I bent down so low that only he could hear me, and said, "I hope you bleed. But if not, come back to me later and we'll talk about it. Just so you know, there's damn glass everywhere. If I were you, I wouldn't move so much." Sandy came out of the kitchen with the words, "The ambulance is on the way. Estimated time of arrival is 5 minutes. Maybe call the police?" Katie and I answered at the same time. She said no, and I said, "Absolutely." Katie wasn't stupid. She knew that if the cops showed up, a report would be drawn up and statements would be taken. Larry was very angry. He said, "Dude, you tried to kill him, and you destroyed my closet. We need to call the police." Well, I didn't actually try to kill him, but I agree that you should call the police. Personally, I'd love to talk to the cops. For you three idiots to hold me down while my wife pleases another man because she lost a bet? Isn't this like sex for money? Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I will certainly do some research. They will never believe it. Who do you think they're going to believe, Larry? Me or the guy lying here with his pants down who's not married to any of the women here? Maybe I'm wrong. Go and call them. Do what you want. Please call the police. I'll go outside and meet the ambulance. I walked around the table and walked over to Katie, who was now on her knees looking at Mark. I squatted down next to her, and this time I actually took off my wedding ring and threw it into the broken glass next to Mark's head. You know what, Catherine? I don't think I'll need this anymore. If you want, you can dig it out of glass. Wait, what is this? Katie looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, cards next to his head. What are these, extra cards? Wait, the guy you gave up on your marriage for, a cheater? What? Are you kidding me? Mark, you're a fucking asshole. I almost cheated on my husband, and you cheated? I didn't argue about almost changed and really changed. I decided that it would come later. Mark could not speak because of the glasses in his hands that covered his face. Now there was blood everywhere. Stay here, Catherine. I'll go out and meet the ambulance, I said. They should be here any minute. I'll let you know when they arrive. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove away. 2 blocks later, I passed an ambulance that was driving very slowly and was looking up house numbers with a spotlight. I drove past and went home. I entered the house and began to pack my things, expecting the police to show up at any moment. I grabbed a small suitcase and a couple of duffel bags and started throwing things in that I would need over the next few days. As I was zipping up my suitcase, I heard the front door open and Katie calling out to me, "Henry, where are you?" I ignored her. Henry, where are you?" I left the bedroom with 2 duffel bags and a suitcase. "Oh, here you are. Henry, what are you doing?" "Henry, you don't have to go anywhere, God, you know." Oh, I know what you will do." "Me, Mark, how about Larry and Brian, or do you draw the line at married guys?" "And you actually knelt down instead of paying in cash. By the way, how much was the bid?" "Henry, stop it. Mark was the only one I was going to do this for, no matter how big the stake. This was the principle. I didn't mean to have sex with him. Besides, you stopped me." "Did I stop you? You've already gotten down to business, haven't I?" She ignored the question and tried to change the subject. "I managed to keep them from calling the cops, and I pulled your ring out of the broken glass. I already said I don't care. I think they should call the police. Hell, I could kill him. Should I just go to the police and confess my crimes to them?" "No, Henry. Bad idea. We'll just pay for what you broke. To hell with this. I won't give them a dime. When's your next poker night?" "Only in a couple of weeks. Mark won't be invited back, so don't worry. 2 weeks will give us enough time to get over what happened. Henry, where are you going?" When she finished her sentence, I was already outside the door. When I got into the car, she was already standing at the front door and shouting something to me. I ignored her and drove away. I drove a few miles, found a motel, and got a room for the night. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling all night. I finally fell asleep around 5 in the morning and slept until 10. I got up, showered, then went to the front desk and paid until Wednesday. I turned the phone back on and there must have been a dozen missed calls from Katie and another dozen from Allison and Mary. There were also a bunch of messages from Katie explaining why she had to do what she did, and it meant nothing to us. She regretted that it happened but still tried to justify it and claimed that it was just a bet. I answered her with only one text in which I suggested forward all her messages to her mother and see how she perceives the situation. Then I turned off the phone again. I sat on a park bench for 2 hours, walked around the mall for another hour, then went and sat on another park bench for another hour. Then I went to the supermarket and bought a bunch of junk food, then went back to my motel room and spent the rest of the night eating crap and researching scams on the internet. By 10 o'clock, I was completely exhausted and fell asleep. On Monday morning, I went to work and tried to be productive. My boss once caught me staring into space and finally asked me what the problem was. When I told him that I had serious family problems, he suggested that I take at least a few days off. He told me to call on Wednesday and let me know if I needed time off for the rest of the week. By this time, it was time to call it a day anyway, so I left and decided to stop by the local bar and grill for a couple of beers and some better food than the crap I bought at the supermarket. I didn't really want to talk to anyone, so I went to the back of the restaurant and took a booth. Regardless of what I wanted, suddenly 2 figures appeared next to me, and neither of them were the waitress. "Hey, Henry, do you mind if Allison and I sit down?" I ignored them and took a sip of ice water. "Are you mad at us too? What have we done?" "Nothing. You two did absolutely nothing," I answered, in a calm, even voice. Mary and Allison sat on the other side of the booth, and Allison spoke next. "Henry, if Mary and I didn't do anything, why are you angry with us? I know you don't really like people playing poker with Katie, but I thought we were friends. I also thought we were friends, but you didn't do anything. But? Are you two seriously asking me this?" "Well, you didn't do anything," I said as sharply as I could without shouting. "I was held by your husband so that my wife could please another man without my interference." The two of you stood there in silence. What friends? At one point before she actually started, I looked around and begged for someone to help finish this, and you two said nothing. "I didn't think she'd actually do it," Mary said. "I thought it was just a stupid joke. I couldn't believe she actually started doing this," Allison said. "Now she feels terrible. She is afraid that you will send these messages to her mom. You won't, will you?" "Not yet, but I will do it if necessary. Everyone knows how bad that situation was. We talked about this after you left and the ambulance took Mark away. Larry and Sandy said they won't call the police. You'll just have to pay." "Listen to me, Mary. I won't pay anyone anything. It is my understanding that Larry and Sandy were instrumental in alleviating what had apparently become a gambling problem for Katie. Now, I don't blame them for her weakness. But Sandy stood there and watched, and Larry really helped hold me back, while Katie ruined our marriage so she wouldn't get kicked out of the fucking poker group. Henry, she's just a wreck. Please try to forgive her," Mary begged. "I'm not sure she wants forgiveness. She doesn't think she did anything wrong. I think she wants an apology from me for stopping her from paying her bet." Suddenly, Allison seemed to have an epiphany. "What if we balance the scales? What if you go out and find a girl who will please you?" I answered her very slowly and deliberately, as if I were talking to a child. "Think about it. We were in a room, presumably with our friends. Then those same friends held me back so she could pay off the bet. Now to balance the scales. I must find a woman who will give me pleasure. So, basically, I humiliate myself in front of all her friends, and she just hears that I got even. The vision of her on her knees is burned into my fucking brain. On the other hand, she may not even believe me when I say that I got even. She can just pretend I didn't do it. I can't do that. I saw it. Please, there has to be a way to end this. I hate seeing my friends suffer." "Bullshit, Mary. You don't want to see me hurt. But were you okay with how hurt I was on Saturday? You stood there while all this happened. I was in pain, but you didn't pay attention to it. Friends don't do that. We are not friends. In my opinion, these two were as guilty as anyone else. I was devising a plan for a little payback. I just had to set the hook. I have no doubt that if someone had said something, this would not have happened. You could say something to your husbands. It might have caused a fight, but it might have saved my marriage. It's time to give them some hope. I just don't know if there's a way to balance the scales, as you say. I'm not necessarily against the idea. I just don't see how." "What if one of us does it?" I looked at Allison for about 10 seconds. "What if it's both of you?" "Wait. You want us to balance the scales?" Mary asked. "I can't do this. Paul will kill me if he finds out." "Of course I understand," I said sarcastically. "The man who held me while my wife cheated on me. I understand everything clearly." "I'll do it," Allison said. We both looked at her in surprise. "You're right. It's partly our fault." "I can't do this," said Mary. "And it's unfair of you to put me in this position, Henry. If Allison is willing to help, that should be enough." "No," I answered. The hook was installed. All that remained was to reel them in. Both of you are nothing. I think this is part of the negotiations. I don't want balance. I need the scales to tip in my favor. Mary sat there for about 2 minutes, thinking. The longer she did this, the more convinced I became that I could handle it. If we do this, will you forgive Katie? If you don't do this, I won't even think about it. You won't tell Paul. I won't say a word. Actually, it wasn't a lie. I wasn't going to tell him this in words. When? I have a motel room until Wednesday morning. I plan to hold out until the weekend and then decide whether to return home or find my own place. God, I can't believe this is happening, Mary said. Welcome to my world, I said sarcastically. Look, if it's that terrible for you, just forget about it. That's not the point, Henry. I like you, and you're a nice guy. If I weren't married, I'd be with you in a heartbeat, but I'm married. You're making me cheat on my husband. Mary, I'm not forcing you to do anything. I know. Okay. If it helps you get over what my husband did, then I'll do it. Either way, it's his fault. If he wasn't an ass, I wouldn't be in this situation. As for me, she could explain it any way she wanted. It would help me get back at her fucking husband, so I didn't care. Okay, meet me tomorrow evening in my room, 6 o'clock. I'll bring something to eat and some wine. Both women got up from the table and walked away, talking to each other. They looked excited about tomorrow night and didn't seem upset. Am I the only one who takes marriage vows seriously? I know what you're thinking. Here I am, a married guy planning to date 2 married women while talking about the sanctity of marriage. As for me, she cheated on me. By doing this, she insulted and humiliated me. She has already annulled our marriage. I no longer obeyed the vows. Everything was over except the paperwork. And the women I was going to meet? They and their husbands were partially responsible, so to hell with them. I'll never understand those people whose spouses cheat, but they intend to follow the sanctity of marriage rules, blah, blah, blah. What's good for the goose is my motto. I understand that she did not intend to cheat on me, but it was not difficult for her to accept deciding to do this when her precious place in the poker group was on the line. Yes, I'm an ass. Yes, she needs help with her gambling problem. The problem is that she won't get help until she hits rock bottom. Perhaps divorce is rock bottom. The next day, Tuesday, I returned to my homeland, making sure that Katie was not there, and went in to get some new things. It was difficult to walk through my house, see my life everywhere, and know that it would no longer be the same. Every time I got sentimental, I imagined her kneeling in front of Mark. The angry emotions were still strong, so I ended up not taking anything that could remind me of her. I took some of my electronics, my laptop, my iPad, my camera, some basic tools, some clothes. I decided that I would start looking for an apartment after I left and come back later for the rest of my things. I didn't really want that much. I left the house and went apartment hunting and found an inexpensive, furnished 1-bedroom apartment that I could rent month after month. I can move any time after Saturday. After signing the agreement, I went to lunch and got ready to meet the girls. I went to Best Buy and bought an Apple SD card reader and a dozen SD cards. I also bought the cheapest color printer they had that printed wirelessly. Then went to a liquor store and bought a couple bottles of wine that I knew Mary and Allison liked. I went back to the motel room and stacked all my things in the room so it looks cluttered, and then set up the 35mm camera so it had a clear view of the bed. Since the room looked cluttered, the camera was not very visible. At 5:30, I ordered some appetizers from a local restaurant, and they arrived just before 6. At 6:15, there was a soft knock on the door. I looked through the peephole to make sure they were girls and not some angry husbands. I wasn't afraid of my husband at all. I just didn't want to be caught off guard again. I walked over and turned on the camera to record video. I invited the girls in and offered them wine. At first they refused, but soon decided that a little liquid courage wouldn't hurt. Girls, we shouldn't do this. We can just drink wine and eat and just hang out. You both know that I will never force you to do anything you don't want to do. I know, Henry, Allison said. You're such a nice guy. It's a shame Brian isn't as good as you. Katie really hit the jackpot. Mary and I have been talking about this since we left you yesterday. You were right. We failed you when we kept our mouths shut. Our inaction was action. I'm really sorry we did this. Yes, I appreciate it. I just would like to know what I did wrong. What the hell do you mean, what did you do wrong? Mary, I find it hard to believe that Katie made such a decision spontaneously. If she wanted to do it with me there, she should have done it earlier when I wasn't there. I would just like to know what I did wrong to make her think she could do this. Henry, I sincerely believe that nothing like this ever happened before Saturday. It's impossible to keep this a secret. It could come out. It always comes out. She didn't know how true this was. Okay, stud, Allison began. At the risk of seeming too impatient, I'll go first. Come to the bed and stand. I did what she said, and she took her place in front of me. Okay, I'll undress you. You must stand still. No hands? I want to do this myself. Mary sat down in the office chair next to the desk and smiled widely. It made me wonder if these two had done something like this before. Mary was in the perfect spot to capture us all on video. Allison unbuttoned my shirt and pulled it down so my arms were in the sleeves and sticking out at my sides. She ran her hands over my chest with a big smile on her face. She untied my shoes and made me lift my feet one by one to take them off. Then she took off my socks. She then unbuckled my belt, unbuttoned my jeans, and pulled them over my hips. After she helped me take off my jeans, she knelt in front of me. I wanted to speed up the process, but I resisted and let her do her thing. It was amazing. Brian was lucky. It didn't take long. When she realized that I was completely done, she sat on her knees and looked at me. I leaned over and kissed her gently on the forehead. Amazing, Allison. Simply amazing. Mary, you'll have to give me a few minutes to recharge the batteries. We sat down, ate some of the food we had brought, and drank some more wine. While we ate, we talked again about what happened after I left Larry and Sandy on Saturday night. Allison went first. Well, you were there when Katie saw the cards on the floor near Mark's shoulder and accused him of cheating. At first, he couldn't even speak. Due to all the glass falling on him, he was afraid that the glass on his hands would get into his broken nose or mouth. Mary took her turn. You should have seen his face. When the ambulance arrived, which took a few minutes longer than it should have, they were able to remove his hands from his face. He looked terrible. By the way, what happened to, I'll go meet the ambulance? Allison asked with a smile on her face and a voice that was supposed to imitate me. I answered. I must have forgotten. Unfortunately, he still survived. Mary shuddered again. Well, he started telling everyone that he didn't cheat and that Katie owes him a bet and he's going to kick your ass, blah, blah, blah. You should have seen all this blood, Allison said. There was bloody blood everywhere. The ambulance people didn't even try to remove him. They just covered him up and took him away. Mary took the initiative into her own hands. Katie said she would never pay their bet unless he proved he didn't cheat. Here I interrupted Mary. So if Mark proves that he didn't cheat, she will still pay? The girls fell silent with a significant pause. Then Mary spoke again. I'm pretty sure there's no need to worry about anything happening at the moment. Are you absolutely sure? As I already said, Mark received hundreds of cuts all over his body. Most were tiny cuts, but a few required stitches. He actually had 2 pretty serious cuts on his stomach that needed stitching. He stayed in the hospital until Monday, when all the glass was removed from him. Larry went to the hospital and talked to him. Allison spoke. He was so angry. He said he would kick your ass and then not only get a bet from Katie but have sex with her right in front of you. Mary intervened again. I'm pretty sure Mark will never be allowed back in since he was caught cheating. However, Larry is also angry with you. He thinks you'll have to pay for the curio cabinet, and he's angry because his homeowners' insurance will have to pay the hospital bill. He also wants you to pay for all the things in the closet that are broken. Mary, pass on my message. Tell Larry and Sandy that I will only pay 10 cents if the judge tells me to. There will be court documents and statements to make this happen. My statement would be as if I discovered a full-blown orgy was going on, and when I tried to stop my wife from participating, I was illegally restrained by Larry, Brian, and Paul. My statement will include the names of all participants and everyone who was there. I'll make sure all their neighbors get copies, as well as the neighbors of everyone who was there. I will make sure family, friends, and work colleagues also receive copies. I'll make sure every church anyone attends gets a copy as well. And if I can, I'll contact Oprah and tell the world about it. We sat in silence for about 30 seconds. Suddenly, Mary blurted out, "Okay, it's my turn. Let's go." "Okay, but I want you both naked too." "We don't have to be naked for this," Allison laughed. "I know you don't need to be naked, but I feel a little awkward." "To hell," said Mary. "We've come this far. What difference does it make?" She undressed and Allison followed suit. I stood at the edge of the bed again, and this time, it was Mary who knelt down. She wasted no time. I was trying to think of something to take my mind off what was happening and prolong the process when Allison stood up from her chair and pushed me back onto the bed, leaving Mary on her knees. I landed on my back, and Allison jumped onto the bed. After about 5 minutes, I felt it was coming to an end when Mary said, "Okay, it should have been my turn, Allison. Get down so I can join." Allison giggled and rolled to the side, and Mary took her place. She eventually rolled off and lay on her back next to me. "So," I said, "have you done this before? We had our moments. You know we went to college together, right? Well, we shared once or twice." "That's right, Mary," Allison laughed. "1 or 2 times 100. Mary laughed too, and then said, "Okay, it was fun, but I have to go. Henry, I hope this tips the scales in your favor. Please call me tomorrow and let me know what you think. I really hope you two can make it through this. I don't want to lose you as friends." Allison looked and said, "Henry, we are very sorry that we didn't say anything when everything was happening. Please call me tomorrow so we can talk. If you want to talk later, call me anytime. Just so we're clear, this was probably the only way." "Probably?" Mary asked. "Come on, Mary. That's all that's been talked about since last night. You know you'll do it again. We just have to be a lot more careful than doing it in front of everyone while playing poker." Okay, I laughed. "We'll talk tomorrow. Someday I'll call you." The girls left and I got to work with the video I made. I edited it mostly down to the sexy parts, then printed out some still photos that were very compromising of both women. Then I transferred the edited video to the remaining SD cards and made 9 identical envelopes. Each envelope contained an SD card and several very explicit photos of the girls. Although it would have been pretty obvious to anyone who knew us, I cropped the photos and blurred the video so my face wouldn't be visible. I went to bed and fell asleep instantly. On Wednesday, I woke up early, turned my phone back on, and saw another dozen calls and messages from Katie. I didn't listen or read them, but I didn't delete them either. I called my boss and told him I was going to take the rest of the week off, then came home after Katie left for work and packed up more of my tools and personal items. During lunch, Katie called me again. This time I answered the call with a very short, "What?" This caught her off guard, and it took her a few seconds to realize that I had actually answered the phone. "Oh my God! Henry, don't hang up! Where are you? Henry, we need to talk. We can get through this. Please, talk to me. Where did you stop? Please come home so we can work on ending this. Please." At that moment, I interrupted her. "Katie, shut up and listen for a minute. We'll meet on Saturday. I'll arrive at 6 p.m. Let everyone who was with Larry and Sandy be there, except your boyfriend. If I see him there, I'll kick his ass again. He's not my boyfriend, Henry. Besides, he's really not in shape to go out right now. As you say. Saturday, 6 o'clock. This is not a party, this is a discussion. You and all your friends can try to convince me why I shouldn't divorce you. I haven't listened to your messages, so be prepared for what you have to say. Tell your friends not to be late. Henry, please don't ruin our marriage over a stupid debt. When is the next poker night? I'm not sure. Maybe a few more weeks. You don't have to come if you don't want to. See you on Saturday. Okay, Henry, I love you. Please come home. See you on Saturday." She just didn't understand. She thought the whole problem was that I was overreacting to what she simply knew was her duty. She just didn't see the big picture. She honestly didn't see that she had a problem. It was more important to her to honor the poker bet than our marriage vows. She hasn't hit rock bottom yet. The rest of the week passed relatively calmly. I went to Walmart and bought things I would need in my apartment, for the bathroom, kitchen, bedroom. A lot more stuff than I expected to buy. And I stopped at a motel for the night. I spent my nights researching divorce. We didn't have children. We could sell the house and get $15,000 each after the sale. We had little debt. We earned about the same. This should be relatively easy. On Saturday afternoon, I sent Katie a message asking her to text me when everyone was there. I didn't want to sit in awkward silence waiting for someone to show up, or having to rehash everything if someone was late and missed. At 5:45, she sent me a message that everyone was already in place and waiting in the dining room. At 5:55, I rang the doorbell of my house. "Honey, this is your house. You don't need to ring the doorbell," Katie said, opening the door. "As you say," I answered, walking past her. When I entered the dining room, I was carrying a small duffel bag filled with envelopes. All the furniture in our dining room was given to us by Grandma Katie. The table was really big, for 10 people, 4 chairs on each side and 1 on each end. When I entered the dining room, there were 3 empty seats next to me. Larry was sitting at the far right, Sandy was sitting on the left with his back to me. To her left were 3 empty seats. To Larry's right, facing me, sat Paul, then Brian, then Mary, then Allison. To the left, at the head of the table, sat Terry. Katie walked past me and sat in the middle of the 3 empty seats, hoping to get me to sit next to her. I went to the left end of the table, where Terry was sitting, and said, "My place." Katie told me, "You can sit next to Katie. Let's bet her on BJ that I'll sit here. It might lead to something. Katie, put your phone on record. I have a feeling you'll need it someday." Without saying a word, Terry stood up and sat on the other side of Katie. There was an empty seat to my right, and I placed my gym bag on it. Katie launched the recording app on her iPhone and placed it on the table. I sat down and looked around the table. After an awkward silence, I said, "Okay, we all know why we're here. I'm thinking of divorcing Catherine. If you care, convince me not to do this. Terry, why don't you go first?" "Look, Henry, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask. My wife cheated on me and we got divorced because of it. I'm very sorry that this happened." Obviously, Terry was not properly prepared for the meeting. "Thank you, Terry. I appreciate your honesty. Perhaps I will have questions later." I looked around at those sitting at the table. "What about you, Larry? What do you think?" "It's not a problem for me. She loves you, and she's beautiful. Do you think she was a holy virgin when you met her?" "No," I answered, "but I expected her to become a saint after we met." "Would you mind if Sandy pleasured other guys?" Larry was silent and Sandy fidgeted in her seat. Being the sarcastic jerk that I am, and completely jokingly, I said, "So, how long have you two been openly cheating on each other?" Sandy blushed, and everyone's jaws dropped, except Larry's. Larry looked at me like I was daggers, but he didn't deny it. Katie blurted out, "Sandy! Really?" Sandy suddenly had a truth-telling attack. "We only did this 3 times. I don't like it. But Larry says we should continue, but I want to stop. I fucking hate this." "Okay, Sandy," I said calmly. "How about you and Catherine talk about this later? You don't have to do anything you don't want to do." "You know? What an asshole you are!" Larry yelled. "I told Katie when she started dating you and you couldn't play poker that you were an asshole and that she should leave you. She should have left you a long time ago. You destroyed thousands of dollars worth of closet in my house because your wife did the right thing and paid the bet. Maybe I should just destroy everything here?" "Come on," I answered calmly. "All this was given to your friend Catherine by her grandmother. All this means nothing to me." He sat down again, breathing heavily and looking at me like a dagger. "Paul, Brian, would any of you want to try?" "Listen, dude," Paul began. "None of us want our friends to get divorced. I mean, you guys have been our friends for years." Here I cut him off. "No, Paul, you are not friends with us. You're friends with Catherine, and I'm her husband." But you are friends with my wife, he said. I thought so. And then she stood there silently while you three held me down, and my wife knelt in front of the other guy. But Mary didn't do anything. It was us. I glanced at Mary and Allison, who were looking at the table. I don't think this conversation went the way they hoped. Answer me, Paul. You walk into a bar and see your friend Brian's wife in the far corner, on her knees in front of another guy. What are you doing? You are looking. Do you call Brian and hope he makes it on time? Are you getting between them to keep her from doing anything? Well, how about you go to the bar and see Brian in the far corner? What are you doing? Are you calling Allison? You see, I already know the answer to all these questions. If it's Brian's wife on her knees, you step in and get her out of there and tell Brian. If Brian is going to buy a Hummer, you sit down and watch, and maybe join in. Allison will never find out from you because Brian is your friend and Allison is your friend's wife. What about you, Brian? Are you saying I'm exaggerating? Brian was silent. You see, the problem is that Katie is your friend and I'm not. If Katie attacks me, you won't care because I'm your friend's husband, I'm not your friend. If I had not entered this room, none of you would have said a word to me. You would all think to yourself, okay, the seal is broken. Next time, I will be the one to make a bet with her. I looked at Katie. When did you stop respecting me? What? Darling, never. I respect you more than any other person I've ever known. When did I first tell you that this was normal? Well, I never said so, she answered meekly. How many times did this happen before last week? What? Never. Why are you so shocked by this question? Why should I trust you? If I hadn't seen it happen, would you have told me? Would you wait until we got home and say, hey, honey, did a funny thing happen at the card game this evening? That's the problem, Katie. You were willing to put your marriage on the line, but not your precious spot in the poker group. I came second after these idiots. I can't come to terms with this. I looked at Brian and Paul. You assholes knew that Katie would value her fucking place in poker more than her marriage, and you egged her on, instead of talking some sense into her. I looked at Brian and Paul and said, what do you think you would do if you had to watch your wives have sex with another man? They grinned and looked at each other, and then turned to me. Does she get paid for this? Asked Paul. Mary's jaw dropped. Not wanting to be left behind, Brian decided to add his own comment. Will she learn anything new? I just smiled. So when's the next poker game? They muttered something to each other for a long time. Then Brian asked, do you want to come? No, I said. When's the next poker game, Catherine? I do not know why. You just said that you won't come again, but you keep asking when the next time will be. Okay, I've had enough. Here it is. I took my gym bag and took out all the envelopes. I was going to break up a couple of marriages tonight, but you know what? I think they're already doomed. I put the envelopes back in the bag and put it back. Catherine, you ripped my heart out, and you actually asked your friends to hold me while you did it, and you still don't think you did anything wrong. You not only cheated on me, but also humiliated me without a second thought. Your place in the poker group is clearly more important to you than me. The worst thing, Catherine, is that these people are not your friends. True friends would never do this to you and would never allow you to do this to themselves. Katie began to intervene. No, darling, you are the most... Calm down, Catherine. Now it's my turn. You didn't even apologize for it. All you did was try to make me understand how you should pay your debts. You kept telling me that we had to get through this, but you never even admitted that you did anything wrong. Even after all this, you still plan to continue going to poker nights. If you're willing to bet on sexual favors while I'm there, what are you willing to bet on when I'm not there? Am I going to raise someone else's child just because you lost a bet and someone else knocks you up? We're done. You have a gambling problem. Call for help. I'll talk to a lawyer on Monday. If you want to hire a lawyer, that's fine. As far as I'm concerned, you can have almost anything, including your dumb friends. What an asshole you are, Brian said. Fuck you, Brian, Allison said, surprising everyone. Everything he said is true. You people are trashing his marriage to Katie for your own amusement. He was just about to spit in your face saying I had sex with him, and I don't know why he didn't. You know? I did it. Henry, will you take me with you? I mean, could you give me a ride? Another awkward silence followed for about 10 seconds. Then Mary spoke. You know what, Paul? Asked Mary. I'm tired of being the only one responsible in this relationship. Henry's right, you don't even sit next to me. Before all this happened, Henry idolized her. I always wanted you to treat me the way he treated her. This is the first time I have seen them not sit together, touch each other, or hold hands. It really pisses me off that you helped this happen. Henry, she continued, last Saturday when it happened, I was just as shocked as you were. I honestly thought it was some kind of joke because I thought I knew how much she loved you. I'm really sorry I didn't say anything then, but maybe it's better for you to find out now while you don't have children. Could you give me a ride too? We left the house with Katie sobbing uncontrollably, Larry and Sandy arguing about the swing, and Paul and Brian telling their wives, if you don't come home today, don't come home at all. Both girls walked out with their middle fingers in the air. I took Allison and Mary to Allison's parents' house and returned to my motel. I finished off the alcohol that was left in the room and ate the remaining junk food. I finally passed out around midnight. Devil went without any problems. We sold the house and she put all the furniture into storage. I got everything I wanted from a house that, oddly enough, was not big. Allison and Mary separated from their husbands, and the three of us remained friends with benefits. I haven't heard anything from Katie. Actually, I was disappointed. I thought she would fight harder and maybe try to force counseling. Obviously, I was right that marriage never meant as much to her as it did to me. I never really connected with either Mary or Allison on a romantic level, but the three of us became very close. A year after the infamous money, I was sitting in the bar where Katia and I went on special occasions. The divorce took place 4 months ago. I sat feeling sorry for myself and missing Katia. As I sat there, sipping my beer and staring at the wall, I felt a presence behind me. I continued to stare at the wall, hoping that whoever it was would go away. I really didn't want to talk and was hoping he would just leave if I didn't react. Is this seat taken? I lowered my head and stared into my beer. No, sit down. Such a nice guy like you, I'm surprised you're here alone. Well, I have 2 wonderful friends that I usually hang out with, but they're on a double date. Yes, I also thought that I had wonderful friends. It turns out my friends weren't so amazing after all. I happened to run into a couple of girls who said there would be a hot, lonely guy with a really kind heart sitting alone here in this bar. I decided that I would come here and introduce myself. I'm Katie. I chuckled and played along. Nice to meet you, Katie. I'm Henry. Why are you here alone? Are you celebrating something? No, I really have nothing to celebrate. I'm a failure in relationships. I couldn't stop my wife from cheating, so I divorced her. My 2 best friends are hanging out with other guys. What about you? Yes, perhaps I'm a failure too. I literally had the best boyfriend in the world who loved me with all his heart, and I hurt him in the worst way I could. I cheated on him and he divorced me. Did he do the right thing? For him or for me? Let's start with him. I'm not sure. I guess you'll have to ask him. People I talk to say he is unhappy all the time. Honestly, what about you? It is very difficult. When he divorced me, the darkest period of my life began. It made me look at myself very closely. I didn't like what I saw. I started counseling for addiction and have continued to do so ever since. My amazing husband saw this happening and tried to warn me, but I didn't believe him. I think in this regard, divorce was inevitable. My addiction would eventually somehow kill his love for me. I never stopped loving you, Kat. I just couldn't. I know, Henry. I understand. First of all, it's so nice to hear you call me Katie or Kat again, and not Catherine. Look, I came here to explain my behavior and assure you that you are not to blame for anything. I know you already know this, but I just felt the need to tell you this myself. That Saturday night at poker, I just knew I was going to win this hand. When I didn't, I was shocked, but decided to pay the rate. I didn't even think about it as sex or cheating. It was like a handshake. I was afraid that they would kick me out of the group. I didn't see it as a bet on my marriage because I never thought you'd leave me. It wasn't even a consideration. I thought that you would be angry, but in the end, you would forgive me because it was my duty. I thought you would understand that I must keep my word. Honestly, I didn't think it was anything big. And now, I see in this the most vile, disgusting, offensive thing that I have ever done to a person. At the time, I couldn't believe you were acting so irrationally. When I started the consultation, the doctor asked what happened. When I told her about the fight and how you made me write it all down, she called you a genius. After listening, she said that she was surprised that our marriage had lasted so long. She also explained why you kept asking when the next poker night was. Just so you know, there were no more poker nights. I haven't picked up a deck of cards since that night, and I'll never pick it up again. I haven't spoken to any of these guys since 2 weeks after our fight. How is Sandy doing? She is all right. She and Larry also divorced. It turned out that he was a cruel asshole, and she was too embarrassed to say anything about it. Eventually, she decided to leave him. She's dating a guy from work. Henry, you were right about everything. I put this stupid poker group above everything else. I loved you with all my heart, and I knew that you loved me too, so I just knew that you would understand and be okay with it. If these people were truly my friends, they would never have let it get this far. I just couldn't help it. I needed to be part of this group. I mean, I let that asshole Mark do what he did, and I feel disgusted with myself. If you hadn't done what you did, I can only imagine what these games would have become. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. I sincerely wish you the best life. You deserve it. I would really like to be friends with you, but I understand if you don't want to. I'll leave now before I start crying like a little girl. Call me. Katie stood up and walked towards the door. Hey, Kat. She stopped, but didn't turn around. Yes, Henry. Have you already had dinner? I saw her shoulders shaking with tears. No, Henry, not yet. She didn't turn around. I stood up, walked up to her, put my arm around her shoulders, pulled her head to my shoulder, and led her to the door. Let's go have a proper dinner. Katie and I started dating again, and a few months later we moved back in together. 9 months later we got married again by a justice of the peace on our previous wedding anniversary. We decided it would be easier to use the same date as before. Katie remained true to her word and gave up gambling completely. She never bets on anything, even as a joke. I know some will say, once a cheater, always a cheater. I don't believe this applies to Katie. I believe her addiction caused her to do things she wouldn't normally do. I looked at the intention behind her actions. Her goal was not to humiliate me or find a lover. She fooled your addiction. The guys in the band are still friends with each other except for Terry, and tell anyone who will listen that they left their wives. I never heard from Mark. Apparently, he didn't want to discuss the topic any further. Last I heard, he left town. Kathy and I are still friends with Sandy, Allison, and Mary. Sandy also quit playing poker. They will all become our son's godmothers. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.